Welcome to Decision Vision, a podcast series focusing on critical business decisions. Brought to you by Brady Ware Company. Brady Ware is a regional, full-service accounting and advisory firm that helps businesses and entrepreneurs make visions a reality.
Welcome to Decision Vision, a podcast giving you, the listener, clear vision to make great decisions. In each episode, we discuss the process of decision-making on a different topic from the business owner's or executive's perspective. We aren't necessarily telling you what to do, but we can put you in a position to make an informed decision on your own and understand we might need help along the way. My name is Mike Blake, and I'm your host for today's program. I'm a director at Brady Ware Company, a full-service accounting firm based in Dayton, Ohio, with offices in Dayton, Columbus, Ohio, Richmond, Indiana, and Alpharetta, Georgia. If you'd like to engage with me on social media with my chart of the day and other content, I'm on LinkedIn as myself and at Unblakeable on Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, and Instagram. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast aggregator, and please consider leaving a review of the podcast as well. Before we get into this week's conversation, I want to mention that a colleague of mine, Betty Collins, who's a partner with Brady Ware and host of her own podcast, Inspiring Women, is helping to lead the 8th annual Brady Ware Women's Leadership Conference. Like most things, it's staying virtual this year, but on July 30th, if you like this podcast and the topics discussed, I suspect you will like their discussion points for that conference. Several speakers, including 2 national voices and the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, are on the agenda. Please check out www.columbuswomensleadership.com. It may seem local to Ohio, but the content is worthwhile nationally. Now, on with this week's Decision Vision. Today's topic, should I get my old job back? And, I've been in the public accounting industry for, in some fashion I've been in for, I guess, 10 to 12 years. Shows I'm not a very good accountant because I can't count that high. But, and one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of kind of shuffling of talent. And in particular, I've noticed there are a lot of folks that work for an accounting firm for some period of time. They leave going off to find at least what they think are greener pastures, and then come back after a period. And I'm sure that happens a lot in other industries as well. Accounting is the one that I happen to see it. And it made me curious about the decision process to leave a job and then come back to it. I've never done that, not because I think it's good or bad, just simply the circumstances really didn't dictate it. And as people are re-entering the workforce here as we record this podcast on July 7, 2021, people may be thinking about getting old jobs back, whether they were furloughed, whether they took a leave of absence, whether they quit altogether because of environmental circumstances dictated by the pandemic, or maybe they simply left because, again, they saw greener pastures elsewhere. So, I don't have data to support this, but my instinct tells me this is a decision that if you're not facing yourself, you probably know somebody that's considering the decision, and maybe you can turn them on to this podcast. And joining us today is Owen Sizemore, who's a certified valuation analyst and manager in the valuation services group here at Brady Ware. And he's a Boomerang employee. He was with us for a while, left, and we'll talk about that story, and has come back, and we are delighted to have him back, and I'm equally delighted to have him on the program. Owen Sizemore, welcome to Decision Vision.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So let's start with kind of where you are today. Tell the listeners about your current role at Brady Ware, please.
Yeah, so I am a manager in the valuation and litigation support practice at Brady Ware, which basically means I take on valuation engagements for a variety of purposes: transactions, tax, litigation support, like I mentioned. And then I also do some due diligence work as well, merger and acquisition due diligence. That's a smaller part of my practice, and I anticipate that getting smaller as time goes on. But it's worth mentioning that I do get into some of that work currently.
So before you came to Brady Ware, what were you doing?
Well, is that the first time or the second time?
Oh, good question. Let's go first time.
Yeah. So first time, Mike, you've probably heard me say this way too many times, but I always tell people I'm a recovering auditor and CPA. So before I came to Brady Ware the first time, I was mainly an auditor for another public accounting firm, and that's where I spent pretty much my whole civilian professional career was as an auditor. Did a little bit of valuation work and due diligence work along the way. Wanted to get into it full time, and that's why I came to Brady Ware.
So, I'm curious. I'm going off script a little bit, but I'm curious. What was it about audit that you didn't like, or what was it about moving into specialty services like valuation that attracted you?
Well, as far as what I didn't like about auditing was that I didn't like the relationship that it created with your clients. It was difficult to feel like you're adding value to them because audit is a compliance engagement for them. It's a compliance engagement, and so I enjoyed the investigative nature of it, but I didn't like everything around it. I didn't like that it felt like our clients were put out by us being there. And because they were put out by us being there, it was really hard to engage with them on bigger picture stuff. And it was also hard to engage them on bigger picture stuff because you're just down in the weeds in an audit trying to get the numbers right that, looking at historical information that it's really hard to talk about the future with your clients. So that's the reason I didn't like auditing. And I liked valuation for very similar reasons. It's forward thinking. You can get into big picture conversations with your client about where they're going. But I also like the quantitative nature of it as well. And you don't quite get that in auditing.
So when you first came to Brady Ware, how long were you at the company the first time around?
I was at Brady Ware for almost a year. Well, I'll say a year and a couple months.
Okay. And so what led you to start contemplating a change? What prompted that thought process or your internal conversation?
There were a handful of things that went into it. I do think it's important to mention that the job that I left Brady Ware for was actually a job I interviewed for before I came to Brady Ware the first time. And so, ultimately decided to come to Brady Ware as opposed to going to Ernst & Young. So it was always on my mind, and I had never had Big Four experience. I simply didn't have the grades or the professional wherewithal to value an opportunity at a Big Four accounting firm right out of school, like most young graduates do. And so it was an experience I never got. It was an opportunity I knew was out there because I'd interviewed for it. So it was kind of in the back of my mind. But as far as what happened at Brady Ware specifically, people had a hard time separating me as a CPA from the rest of the traditional CPA group. And so even though all I did was valuation work, or at least that's all I was supposed to do, when busy season rolled around, there was this pressure to behave and follow a similar schedule as the tax and audit people are following, which, as you know, valuation work, it comes and goes. You very well may find yourself extremely busy in the middle of the summer when the tax and audit folks at a CPA firm aren't doing much. And what was kind of the defining moment was I had a networking event that I set up with a financial planner here in town. And I think it was maybe April 5th. So I went to this networking meeting, and at the time, the valuation group honestly was pretty slow. So I go to this networking event, come back the next day, and one of the partners here asked where I had been, and I said, "Well, I had a networking event," and he said to me, "No more networking events during busy season." And I didn't respond to that very well, to be honest with you, because again, busy season shouldn't be something that necessarily drives the schedule of valuation people. What drives their schedule is the inflow and outflow of work.
Yep.
And on average, valuation people will bill as much hours or even more than their audit and tax colleagues over the span of a year. It just comes at different times. And so I was pretty frustrated that there was this expectation to work like I'm a CPA, even though I'm not doing CPA work during that busy season time, that traditional busy season time of the year. And then of course, what happened was after regular busy season was over, we got very busy on the valuation side. And I was working Saturdays in the summer, which again is that in and of itself, not a problem. Happy to work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week if I have to. But to be expected to work busy season with everyone else and then, deal with the highs and lows of the highs and lows of valuation work was not going to work for me. And so I, had that Ernst & Young opportunity in the back of my mind. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be expected to work this hard all the time, and I never got that Big Four experience, I might as well pursue that and see where it goes. And at least I'll know either way that it was a good move or a bad move, but at least I'll put that question to rest in my mind. So that's pretty much why I left.
Okay. So then you made the move and you were there for your E&Y for some period of time. What made you realize or made you start to think that maybe that wasn't the right move to make?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a number of things leading up to it. One, culturally, those big organizations are just different. They're not good. They're not bad. They just are. And the best example of it I can offer is when I walk down a hallway and I pass a coworker that I might not know at all. I may barely know, or if I do know him, I always smile and greet them and say hi and go on about my business. I certainly don't try to pull someone into a small talk conversation, but I feel like it's just a nice thing to acknowledge someone as you pass by them. Well, I would do that at EY, and you could tell people were, I don't want to say put out by it, but they certainly didn't know how to respond to it.
Huh.
And again, that's just I'm trying to offer a small example of the sort of tense culture in those big places. So, culturally it wasn't a great fit, but probably the bigger issue for me was that I had some good ideas on how to do business development, and they worked in the middle market. I think they were easily scalable, and they involved relationships with big law firms. And coming from the middle market and sort of being an out of towner, because I had to change cities to go to EY. I did not have the relationships with the big law firms in town, but I knew that some of the partners that Ernst & Young did. And so I presented this business development idea to him and just said, look, I just need an introduction. You can be a part of it. You can, or you don't have to be, it's up to you. But if you can just give me an introduction, I'll run with it. And I think it'll work. And that business development idea was not warmly received. And I come from a place in the middle market. When you have a senior accountant or a senior associate or a manager or pretty much any level employee that is excited and comes up with ideas about business development and networking, my experience had been that partners were they loved it. They wanted to get behind it. They were glad that somebody was thinking about that. Whereas that wasn't the case at EY. You really got this feeling that they just wanted you to put your head down and do the work, and we'll make you a partner someday if we think you're worthy of it, and we're not going to get behind your own initiatives and the efforts you're trying to take control of with your career and make it happen. It's we'll do it for you if we want you to have it. That's the takeaway I got from it. So there was that. Culturally, it just wasn't a big fit. And then it was exciting to work on big M&A deals with big companies, but again, just the sheer size of those organizations in EY, there wasn't really a personal connection with your colleagues really and your clients, and it just wasn't a good fit for me all around on those fronts.
So how long did it take for you, to come to realize that wasn't something you could fix, that you'd have to probably make another change?
Probably about 5 or 6 months into it.
Okay, so pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty quickly. And at the 5 or 6 month mark, I knew that it was not going to be a long-term thing. And initially my plan was, you got to do whatever you do, you always have to do it for a year. Or at least that's what I've been told by people, that you should always stick around at whatever job you have for a year. So that was the plan. Once the year passed up, I would start looking to make a move.
So, you ultimately came back to Brady Ware, which is awesome. But did you think about moving to another firm first, as opposed to coming back to Brady Ware? And if so, what made you choose trying to come back as opposed to moving on to yet another firm?
So I knew that the first place I was going to look was Brady Ware, but I wasn't sure if an opportunity would be there. So I had some other firms in mind, but Brady Ware was going to be my first choice, for a lot of reasons, but namely because even though we had to do some work on figuring out my schedule and my schedule expectations, it's difficult to find, at least in this area of the country, it's difficult to find a firm the size of Brady Ware's with a dedicated valuation partner, and even a dedicated valuation team. They're just few and far between. So I knew Brady Ware was going to be my first choice, and if that didn't work, I wasn't. I was kind of throwing rocks out there just to see what would happen.
Okay. Now, you had some very specific reasons for why you left Brady Ware in the first place. Did you have concerns about those things basically starting up again? And if so, how did you convince yourself that either those concerns would go away, or the second time around you'd be able to work through them?
Well, I knew that in order for me to come back, it was going to be a conversation that I had to address first and foremost, and with the managing partner of the firm. So that was it. I knew that the people in charge of my schedule, the people in charge, period, I had to get their buy-in, and it had to be very clear on what the expectations for my schedule would be before I would come back.
And did you have a sense before you even started the conversation that Brady Ware would be receptive to you returning?
I felt like I hadn't burnt any bridges that I was aware of.
Okay.
And I won't say I didn't know how the conversation was going to go for sure, but I, recognizing I didn't think that burnt bridges, recognizing that Brady Ware does have a valuation team, and at least they talked about taking the valuation practice seriously prior to me leaving. And it seemed like it seemed like something that we could come to an agreement on. I was fairly hopeful that we could work it out.
Okay. And how did you initiate the conversation? Did you contact the managing partner directly? Did you go through a go-between? How did you do that?
No, I contacted the managing partner directly. If I remember correctly, I think I texted him and said, hey, it's Owen. Would you be interested would you entertain a conversation about me coming back to Brady Ware? And he said, absolutely. And so we set a date and time to meet for some drinks, and we just sort of sat down and hashed it all out.
So it sounds like it was fairly quick. I think there's a great object lesson there. It's so important when you leave a place to leave it well and not burn any bridges. And whether it's leaving the door open to coming back, or in my scenario, a place that I worked for a number of years, they still refer me work, because I didn't burn any bridges. And even if you're leaving in a scenario where you're kind of irritated, there's just, there's no substitute for leaving classy, because there's no reason to just close doors prematurely.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's, even if you leave just flat out angry, you got to remember that, yeah, you might be mad at the decision makers who were in charge at the time you left, but you may have had great relationships with the next generation. And whether you mean to or not, you may burn bridges with the next generation that you had previously had good relationships with, if you leave in so bad of a way. So it's best to just put angry aside and do your best to be polite, be helpful, right? Transition your projects in the most efficient and complete way possible, and put it behind you in a way that you'll feel good about.
So I'm curious, you're at E&Y for about 5 months before you realize it wasn't the fit you thought it was going to be. So I don't remember the actual timeline, but it's probably less than a year that you were there. Was it hard to tell them that you were going back?
Yeah, it was, because it was the same. I think his title was managing director. It was the same guy that I had interviewed with him the first time, and then when I had to respectfully just turn it down. I didn't get offered the job, but my communications with him in the first time I interviewed was, he felt like things went good, just sit tight. And then of course, the initial opportunity at Brady Ware came up, so I had to respectfully remove myself from being considered. And then the second time around, it was with that same individual, and but the second time was a little bit different because there wasn't an actual job posting. I just reached out to him and I invited him to breakfast, and told him that if there was a need, that I'd love to explore that opportunity that I passed up on. So it was a pretty informal process. Actually making the change from Brady Ware to EY, and this individual, I think, kind of opened some doors that weren't formally open for me to come. So it was tough. It was tough to tell him that I was leaving, because I felt like I certainly wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for him. And I think he kind of went out of his way to get me the opportunity. And, I hated to let him down. And he was supportive about it. It wasn't mean or disrespectful or anything, but I acknowledge that I got that job because of him. He worked on getting it for me, and then had to turn around and leave relatively quickly. So that was tough.
I wonder if he sensed at all that there wasn't a good fit, and that maybe he wasn't totally surprised, or did you just not have enough contact with your pulse in the situation to really know that?
Mike, I honestly don't know. I don't know, but I did. I wrote a hand thank you, or I hand wrote an apology letter / thank you letter for giving me an opportunity, and apologize it didn't work out. Never really heard from him after that, but it's accounting, it's Big Four. He sees people come and go all the time, so it was probably really no skin off his back, I'm sure. But yeah, it was tough to acknowledge to myself that I got someone to help me do something, and turn around and left pretty quickly.
So, looking back on it now, and you've been back at Brady Ware for some time, I think a year and a half or close to it, was it the right decision to come back?
It absolutely was. Obviously, if you're not a fit for a place culturally, you shouldn't be there, regardless of where you end up going. But it was tough leaving Brady Ware the first time around, and I will say, the process of coming back was pretty painless. I told the managing partner about the issues I was having and why I left, and he was very supportive that we'd be able to figure those things out, and no regrets. it's been great ever since. It's where I belong, and unless something crazy happens, it's where I'm going to stay.
So those issues that you had the first time around, sounds like they've been effectively cleared up and taken off your desk.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's never been there's never been any inkling that those issues are still out there. Now, I will say and this is a me thing, knowing that my colleagues are here on Saturdays. Sometimes I come in on Saturdays just as a show of solidarity, but that's a choice on my part. So, and I'm happy to do it. I don't know. You see people working hard. You certainly don't want to ignore the fact that your colleagues are having a tough time.
Yep.
Even though you're not going to ask them to work Saturdays for you in the summer on your evaluation work. But at the same time, I think they appreciate that I show up, and I think one Saturday this busy season, I brought breakfast for everyone. So, it's important for people to know that you support them, even though you might not be right there in the fray with them.
I think that's astute. I don't come in on Saturdays, and I hardly come into the office at all. But one thing I've always tried to do whenever I've worked at a CPA firm is, at least on a big tax deadline day like April 15th, I'll make sure that I'm in the office, and I'll typically clear my schedule so that if somebody, I'm not touching a tax return, but if they need help like stuffing envelopes and stuff, or just taking stuff down to the post office, I have to have an extra pair of hands to make myself available. Now, frankly, people are smart enough to just not engage me. And I think part of that is because I don't know the processes, so it'd take more time to teach me than it would save for me to actually be a participant. But I do think there's an appreciation when if you're not the core accounting group, that you're at least making some effort to be there in the trenches during crunch time. I think there is something to that.
Absolutely.
So looking back on it, what lessons do you think you learned from the whole experience? What are some things that you think are key takeaways that if somebody were coming to you and saying, look, I'm thinking of getting my old job back at some place, what might you tell them?
Well, I'd say one, you've got to be direct on addressing the issues that you had and the things that drove you to leave the first time. That's one, because don't go into it blind. Don't go into it assuming that everything's going to be okay. Find who's in charge, whoever has the ability to address those issues on your behalf, and make sure they're addressed. Because if my experience the second time around was the same as it was the first time, this wouldn't be working. So that's important. And then two, don't be afraid to communicate. Even if that means going over somebody's head. When the managing partner and I had the conversation about me coming back, and I told him what was going on, one of the first things he said was, "Why didn't you tell me this the first time? Why didn't you let me know this was happening?" And I said, "Well, I kind of felt like I was going over someone's head, and I've always been taught you just don't do that." And a lot of that is carryover from a military career. But I just, I had this idea that you don't go over people's head. And if I had let go of that and just tried to address it with somebody that could do something about it, probably never would. I may have never left.
That's a really tough spot to be in. I can empathize that. You want to respect the chain of command. It's a big move politically to go over somebody's head, because once you do that, you better kind of get what you want, or it's it's going to come back. It's going to come back on you in a bad way. So yeah. I can see how that part of the decision process would be hard. I think for anybody that would be hard.
Yeah, if you're going to go over someone's head, it better be over something that if it doesn't get fixed, you're leaving. Yeah. Because you may need to after that anyways.
That's a good point.
It's definitely a last resort move, but I wish I'd done it, because it might have changed things. Another thing I learned again, the importance of not burning bridges, because up until the time I had left Brady Ware, I had worked for, Brady Ware was my fourth accounting firm, kind of worked places 1 to 2 years, 3 in one case, and then would change firms just to try a new one out, see if there's new clients, new opportunities. And so Brady Ware was the fourth firm I had worked at. And aside from this whole scheduling thing, was my favorite one. I love the fact that they empowered me to do valuation work. I love that they were serious about the valuation practice. And so it was a good thing that I didn't burn that bridge, because I didn't realize it at the time, but I would have, if I had burned it, I wouldn't have been able to come back, and I would have regretted that.
So on this has been I think a very useful conversation. Some of our listeners may have questions they wish I would have asked but didn't, or may want to go deeper on something. If somebody wants advice on whether or not they should get their old job back, can people contact you for advice? And if so, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. My email is great. Or honestly, they can call my office phone, but I'd say my email is probably your better bet. And that is O Sizemore. So OSIZEMORE at BradyWare.com.
Well, very good. That's going to wrap it up for today's program. I'd like to thank Owen Sizemore so much for sharing his expertise with us. We will be exploring a new topic each week, so please tune in so that when you're faced with your next business decision, you have clear vision when making it. If you enjoy these podcasts, please consider leaving a review with your favorite podcast aggregator. It helps people find us so that we can help them. If you'd like to engage with me on social media with my chart of the day and other content, I'm on LinkedIn as myself and at Unblakeable on Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, and Instagram. Once again, this is Mike Blake. Our sponsor is Brady Ware Company, and this has been the Decision Vision Podcast.